Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. We are presenting tonight on key communication skills with teens. My name's Rosie Barbara. I'm the Youth Counsellor at Wyndham City Youth Services, and I get the pleasure to work with young people of Wyndham and their families. So as we wait for more people to arrive into the session, I'll just give you a little bit of information about how it will run tonight. So the webinar only goes for 1 hour. We will present for 45 minutes, and then there will be a chance to answer questions for the final 15 minutes. So we also have moderators here tonight in the background. They'll be answering your questions throughout the night. So we encourage you to make the most of this evening by asking the questions as we go, and the moderators will do their best to answer. However, we will have time at the end for some of those questions that they may not answer, and Anthony will be able to assist with those questions. So you can answer anonymously. It is entirely up to you. And we ask you and we encourage you to make the most of it. So just to introduce our presenter tonight, his name is Anthony Hurst. He's also a youth counsellor here at Youth Services, and he has the pleasure to work with young people and their families as well. And I will now pass you on to Anthony, who will present, and I'll catch you at the end of the event. Thank you.
Okay.
You're on, Ant.
Beautiful. Can you see my screen, Rosie? Alrighty, I can see the red box, so I think that means that it is working. So welcome everybody tonight to our key communication skills with teens workshop. So the main focus for today is that we're going to go through, I think I've picked about 4 key strategies that I'd like you guys to walk away with from today. So what we're going to be doing is going through each of them. I've got a few slides to go through to sort of explain them, and we'll then obviously be elaborating on them. And then as we sort of go through each skill, you guys will be able to ask questions along in the chat. And what I'm going to do is we will have that 15 minutes at the end where, you know, we can ask whatever questions pop up. But what I really encourage is ask the questions as the presentation are going along, just because you don't want to forget them. And also I'll try answer a couple of questions after each of the skills that we go through. So just to get us going, would just like to have an acknowledgement of country. So acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which Wyndham Council sits, and on which some of us will be meeting. So I presume that most of us will be in the area of Wyndham, and some of us may be from different areas. We pay respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture, knowledge and the hopes of Aboriginal Australia. We must remember that beneath this building, this land is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. And of course, as I said, there are potentially some of us joining tonight who are not from Wyndham, so would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the different lands on which each of us might be joining from tonight. So something to know is that, of course, whenever we are talking about you know, anything to do with our families, it can be really easy for different things to come up that might distress us, that might get us thinking about maybe different events or situations that we've found ourselves in, either recently or across our life. And so because of that, before we sort of go into any content, we do like to let everybody know that There are professional supports available to you should you feel distressed by anything that you hear or see tonight. Some of the supports available would be Lifeline and Kids Helpline, depending on your age group. You could get to whichever one is the most appropriate for your age group. However, of course, there are lots and lots of other supports available in the form of counselling and psychologists. So if you feel that you would benefit from some additional support, do feel free to get in touch with us at one of the inboxes written here on this screen, and we can assist and help you, link you in with somebody who will be able to provide you some counselling support. Just to also a note here, of course, Rosie had said that myself and her, we make up the counselling team for Wyndham Youth Services. So just really good to know that we can offer up to 10 sessions to young people right across Wyndham, and indeed anyone that has a connection to Wyndham. So whether they're work, studying, recreating, or have a connection to the municipality. In addition to that, immediate family members, such as parents or carers of young people, can also get access to these 10 sessions. And we can also provide a couple of sessions of support to members of the broader community, even if they don't have a direct connection to a young person. So what I might get to do for one of our lovely facilitators that are overseeing tonight, I might get them to look up our community counselling referral link that they can pop in the chat for you guys. And that link is where you can go on to make a referral for yourself or a referral for somebody else. Okay, so one of the ideas that we start with, just to get us going, whenever we look at any sort of concepts around our behaviour, around how we're thinking, but particularly when we're looking at change, is this idea that neurons that fire together wire together. So what that basically means is that when we do enact new patterns of thinking, of behaving, of doing, these pathways in the brain, the more and more we engage in those behaviours, the stronger and stronger those connections in the brain become. Now, the stronger and stronger those connections in the brain become, the easier and easier and easier it feels for us to enact that particular behaviour. So one of the reasons why we like to really emphasize this at the beginning of any session that we do is because often a lot of the skills that we sort of talk about today, some of the strategies or ideas, we kind of get to the end and we might have covered off 4 or 5 and we might be scratching our heads going, okay, this is actually a lot to think about walking away from this session and putting into practice. I might not feel confident in my ability to do it every single time in my, not even maybe feel comfortable in how well I've understood the concept, and that's okay. What we say here is that it's okay if you don't do it every single time. It's okay if you try it and don't get it right every single time. What's important is that the more times you do end up doing it, the stronger and stronger that pathway becomes, and the more and more easier it's going to be for you to draw on that particular behavior or skill set in the future. So it's not about getting it right every time, but every time you do get it right, you're putting a little bit extra into that piggy bank of that skill set, so that that skill set gets fuller, richer, and you're able to draw on it much easier. So, of course, one of the other ideas that we always talk about is, well, why is it that we're working with you parents and carers and adults that are supporting young people? Why is it that we're targeting some of our efforts towards you guys? And, I won't spend too long on this, but the ways in which young people learn emotional intelligence is through the 3 following ways. So the first one is through having emotionally intelligent behaviour modelled to them. So when we talk about modeling, what we're really looking at here is people around who are demonstrating a particular behavior or skill. And we watch other people demonstrate that behavior or skill and then take it on ourselves. That's the concept of modeling. So the idea is that if we as adults are able to be emotionally intelligent in our behavior, that young people, even just by watching and seeing and being around that, are going to be much more likely to be able to regulate their emotions, to understand how they're feeling, to manage their reactions to different situations, and have an overall better emotional intelligence. The second way that we learn emotional intelligence is through reactions and discussions about our emotions. So what that means is that as adults, often we're responding to emotions in young people. And that might be that a young person is feeling really, really angry and has thrown something on the ground. And we might also feel really angry to that. And the way in which we might react to their anger is going to send them a message around whether they should do that behavior again of throwing things. It might send them a message about, is it okay to experience the emotion of anger? And it might also send them a message about how we express our own anger. And so you can imagine that if we say to them, it's not okay to be angry, you shouldn't be feeling angry, you've got nothing to feel angry about, that's going to send a message about anger that's probably not what we're aiming for, whereby the young person will start to think, oh, I must never feel angry, it's not okay for me to feel angry, I shouldn't feel this way. And essentially, whenever they do feel that emotion, it's going to be really, really difficult for them to contain because they've kind of got this really strong message that they should never feel that way. The second thing there would be, of course, that they're looking at our reaction of anger. So how is it that we express anger when we get upset about something? Is it screaming, shouting, swearing, whatever that looks like? We have to be aware, coming back to point one, that that's potentially going to be role modeled to them as well, and that they're going to be seeing that. So reactions to our emotions are another way that we learn emotional intelligence. And of course, discussions about our emotions. So in some families, this might actually not happen too much. And that's probably what it was like in my family. I don't think we really did talk about emotions very much at all. We didn't really talk about what worry is, what it's like, why it comes up, and how it is that we can manage it. Never really spoke about sadness, what it is, why it comes up, how we can manage it. And so often when there are those conversations that come up, it makes it much easier for young people to recognize the emotions that they're feeling. And then, of course, once they know how they're feeling, they've probably got a much better idea around what they need to do to make the situation better. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at today, and I don't want you to be put off by how much text is on this slide. I certainly don't need you to know all of it. There'll just be some little key bits that I'll get you to take. The first strategy that we're going to be talking about today, or the first concept really rather than a strategy, is the idea of listening blocks. So for any of you that are wanting to take some additional notes tonight, this would be a good thing to take some extra notes on. Listening blocks are different things that go on in our head that stop us from really hearing what somebody else is saying. So I've got a few of them listed on this slide and a few listed on the other slide. There's a whole range of them. You would be able to Google listening blocks, and you would get a whole bunch of them that would come up that you can look at. But essentially, these are different things that can get in the way of us actually listening to what someone is saying. So some examples of this could be things like, what might be a good one? Maybe something like filtering. So I can actually give you a really good example of me with filtering, whereby, sometimes when you've got a lot on, and someone comes to you and says, "Oh, hey," and then, they strike up a conversation with you. Sometimes all you're doing is listening for threat. Yeah. So, it might be, I think a good example might be when you're at work, or if there's a particular task that you're working on, you're kind of hearing someone's approaching you like, like you're just like waiting for them to tell you what's the thing that you've got to tell me. Yeah. So you're really focusing on just trying to hear. Just get to the point. Just get to the point. That's often what comes up with this particular listening block. And of course, it might be that there is something, sort of there that we need to respond to. But in fact, if we're only listening or focusing in on that one sort of thing that people are telling us that we think we need to respond to, if we're only listening to sort of half of the information coming in, we're not really listening to the whole story of what somebody's telling us. So that's one example of a block that can come up. So what I would like you to do is I want you to take a look through this list and have a think about if there's anything on here that you feel like you tend to do a lot. We all have different ones. What I've actually done is in a couple slides in, I've actually got a list of 3 or 4, I think it was 3, that I think can come up a lot. From what we've been told by parents, there are 3 that tend to come up quite a lot in the parent-child relationship. And so we're going to be exploring those ones in a little bit more detail. But what I would get you to do is have a look and see if there's any of these ones here that jump out at you as something that you do. And you might like to make a note of it and have a think about how you could go about recognizing when it comes up and what you might like to do differently in the future. So again, if you're like me and you're one of these filtering people who's kind of just like, someone's talking and you're like, just waiting for what the key message is that they're trying to get across. If you're like me in that sense, and you find yourself doing that a bit, what you might do is have a think to yourself and go, okay, I'm feeling really stressed out. I'm going to take a deep breath in, a deep breathe out. When you breathe in, it's always good to breathe out too. I think that's the thing they always forget to tell you. And then really just try and pay attention to what the person is telling you. So I know that for me, that's definitely one that I need to focus on. We've got another group here, and these are other listening blocks that can sometimes come up for us. I think that definitely Rosie would be able to tell you that I am the king of derailing. And so what that essentially is that someone will be talking to me, and something that they say to me just happens to remind me of something else, and then I will just completely lose focus of what it is that they're telling me and go off on that tangent. Now, of course, that can be okay on some occasions, but when someone's trying to tell me something, when someone's trying to explain something, or as we'll learn a little bit later, when someone's trying to connect with me, that can absolutely interfere with the relationship that I have with them and interfere with how open and honest they're going to be with me if they just see me as someone that keeps derailing the conversation. So what I want you to do here is, I again just want you to take a look through this list and see if there are any particular ones that you feel are ones that come up for you quite strongly. And again, what I would get you to do is to make a note down about that and think about what you might like to do differently. So, for me, as, a king derailer, one thing that I could do, and that I probably should do more often than what I actually do, is every time I notice that kind of derailing thought come up, that maybe rather than blurt it out in the moment, I could actually just make a note of it on the side if I'm concerned that I'm going to forget it. And having made that note, I can then just actually pay attention to the conversation that's happening right in front of me. So have a look through here and see if there's any of these other ones that tend to come up for you as well. I think rehearsing is a really interesting one, because I think sometimes when conflict is high in relationships, we can tend to find ourselves rehearsing. And essentially what that is sort of linked to one of the other ones, which was being right, is rather than actually listening to what the other person is saying back to me, I'm already thinking, oh, what am I going to say back? 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 And what that does is it means that I'm not actually hearing anything that this other person's saying. The other person's going to have this sense of, are you even listening to me? Because the comment that I'll make back will probably be completely disconnected from what they've just said. And often that's going to probably cause more discord in that particular relationship. So I think that's another one to keep our eye on. What I've got here is I've actually listed 3 that I hear come up a lot for parents in the relationship that they have with their children. And what I've got here is an example of how these listening blocks might interfere with our ability to connect. So advising is really around us listening to only enough to come up with a quick solution or fix to the problem. So we want to sit in an advisor role where we're sort of telling what needs to be done. Now, of course, the reality is that a lot of times when people come to us and tell us things, they're not necessarily wanting a solution. Sometimes they just want to vent. Sometimes they just want someone to go, yeah, that sucks. So when we're listening only to advise, and we've already decided that we're going to give advice before they've even finished their sentence, before they've even indicated to us, do I actually want advice or do I just want to vent? This block can become activated quite strongly. So an example of this would be if your child comes up and says, oh, tells you that they're tired. And, sort of very quickly, you decide that the solution here is that they need to get to bed earlier and stop playing on their phone. You can probably imagine how that conversation is going to go, but it would be interesting actually to find out, I wonder why this child is actually tired. So we know that tiredness can come from a whole range of different things. Tiredness can be something that comes up for people when they're feeling a bit down. Tiredness can come up for people who have sleeping difficulties. Tiredness can come up for people who are lacking motivation. Tiredness can come up for people when maybe they're feeling overworked. And so I think there would be something here around wanting to get curious about I wonder why it is that they're tired and getting their perspective on that as well. But when we've already decided that we're going to sit in the advisor role, we've basically lost curiosity and already decided what it is that we're going to tell them. The next one is around being right. And so often as parents of teenagers, it can be really difficult to manage our teenagers saying, kind of just disagreeing with us or not doing what we're saying or giving really good advice and them just not following it. And so sometimes what that can get us doing is looking for opportunities to explain to them that we're right. And logically, that kind of makes sense, yeah? Because if I could point out maybe all the times I was right, then maybe they're going to start listening to what I have to say. Now, I think for any of us, whether we're thinking about friendships or with our children, very few people enjoy having it pointed out to them how right the other person was. And very rarely does that sort of make people fall into line, if you will, and all of a sudden start deciding that they're going to listen to that parent or carer. In fact, what it does more often than not is build up a further resistance where a teenager or a child will feel like, they have to kind of prove even further that you were wrong about what it is that you've given advice on. So, when this block comes up for us, we focus more on proving we were right than listening to what was being said. And, if we take the example of your child saying they're tired, one of the things around being right might be that you remind them how many times you've actually told them to get off technology before going to bed. And so, in this case, of course, we're letting them know, hey, I told you about this. But often it's, again, losing the curiosity to find out about what might be sitting underneath it. I mean, it could be about, you know, technology before bed, making it more difficult for them to get to sleep, or it could be something else entirely. And so I think we want to not cut off conversations that could be opened up by, you know, remaining curious about what could be going on there. The third one is identifying. And so what this can look like is us, you know, when someone's talking to us about maybe something that's happened to them or something that's come up for them, we start to kind of connect it and relate it back to our own personal experiences. And so a really common one that parents tell us comes up for them is when, you know, their child says they're tired and they start thinking about, you know, how their day was maybe even busier, or how tired they are as a person, or, you know, it might even be that thought kind of going, oh, really? You think you're tired? Try living a day in my life, you know, as the parent or carer. And so, you know, this concept of identifying can certainly make it difficult for us to listen when things come up for our children. So what I want you to do is to have a think about any of those come up for you, and just think about, like I gave you some examples, think about what strategies you might be able to put in place to, you know, sort of not do that. One, you know, sort of really kind of cool and fun strategy I always, you know, recommend to people is doing the complete opposite. So often when we're really ingrained in doing the same pattern over and over and over again, what can be really helpful to help get us, you know, off the merry-go-round of repeating that same behavior over and over is to just think about what would be the complete opposite thing to do. You know, an example of that might be if you're always, you know, or very often sitting in that advising role of kind of going, well, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. Maybe you'd go, right, so what do you think you'll do about that? And instead of give advice, you know, question and say, oh, so what do you think you're going to do? So just trying to do the total opposite. And you'll know you've done it well because the person that you're doing it with is kind of going to get a little bit of a shock because it's so different to how you would normally respond. So that can be a really nice way to respond in this way. Okay, just quickly, were there any questions in particular about listening blocks before we move on to the next key learning? If maybe one of the facilitators wants to read one or two out.
Yeah, sorry, Anth, no, not at this stage. I've just had a quick look and there doesn't seem to be any specific questions around listening blocks. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rosie.
Great job.
Alrighty, so the next one that we're going to look at, the next key learning is around bids for connection. So what we're going to do first is actually define what this means. A bid for connection is an attempt from one person to another for attention, affirmation, affection, or any other form of positive connection. So these behaviors can be really minor or really major. You know, I think one of the frequent ones that we hear a lot about for adolescents is sometimes they'll just be, you know, this kind of hanging around. So maybe, you know, at night, someone might just come down from their room and sort of just be aimlessly hanging around in the kitchen, and you're kind of going, oh, what are you doing down here? You're kind of not doing anything. Usually you'd be up in your room, you know, what's going on? And so often that can be a bid for connection where, you know, we have an opportunity to tune into that. Now, when a bid for connection presents itself, such as, you know, that young person that comes into the kitchen, there's a couple of ways that we can respond. So one of them is to turn away, and that's basically to ignore it. So the bid for connections come in, we've clocked it, and we've just gone, ignore. The next one is to turn against, and that's a little bit of an attack response. So that might be something like, you know, maybe the teen's hanging around in the kitchen and then you go, hey, have you done the dishes yet? Why haven't you done it? Now, you already know they haven't done the dishes, yeah? So you're asking the question, but you already know the answer. And what you're doing is instead of being curious around what it is that sort of brought them downstairs, you've sort of jumped on something that's probably going to put the interaction into a negative space. So that's the turn against. The turn toward might be something like, hey, did you want to come and watch the block with us? Yeah. So the turn toward is a connect response, and you're probably going to get, no, I don't want to watch the block, and that's completely fine. But the turn toward, demonstrates that idea that you do want to connect, that you're open for connection, and that you're available should they need you. So often, what we aim for is to turn toward. That's often what we try to bring in on most occasions. If we're feeling a little bit tired, a little bit exhausted, it can be really hard to be turning towards every single time. And I don't think I know anyone that can. And so of course, it's absolutely okay to turn away from time to time and sort of just ignore particular things. Let it go to the keeper. What we really try to avoid, though, is the turn against responses. So let's take a look at those in a little bit more detail. And we've got some examples. So it might be that your team kind of comes into the kitchen or the living room or whatever it is. So I've been doing work all day. Now, your turn away response might look like an eye roll, pretending that you didn't hear what they've said, just kind of going, nah, not today. I'm letting it go, not interested. The turn against response might look something like, oh, you've been working all day, and what do you think it is that I've been doing? Yeah, so we can automatically see that the response really pushes things in the direction of disconnection. The turn towards, alternatively, might look something like, right, sounds like it's been a busy day. Now, often when you give a response like this, it's certainly not a sure thing, but you're much more likely to get a story about what it is that's actually gone on that day. What's happened, what's come up, what's been going on. You're much more likely to get a story, information about how things are going with the turn toward response than you are with the turn against or the turn away. Another example of that, might be you've asked to do some chores or something like that, and you'll get the, oh, look, I'm busy, I'll do it later, right? So the turn away response might be ignoring, or it might be venting to whoever will listen. So you'll go, and then go into the kitchen, find whichever ear you can, and then go, can you believe it? So you're sort of having this event, but in the moment, there's sort of just a bit of an ignore response of the situation. The turn against, it could look really similar to the earlier one of this idea where when they say, oh, look, I'm busy, I'll do it later, there might be a thing of you going, what? And I'm not busy? Like, I don't do anything? Like, is that the suggestion here? There can often be that trigger that can come up. And of course, the turn toward response, the connect response, could be something like, sounds like you've got a lot going on. I might be okay with you doing it later. When is it that you were thinking? So, potentially in some cases, if it was something like, they needed to clean their room or, something like that, and they wanted to finish 5 minutes on their game, possibly in some cases, you might actually be okay with them finishing 5 minutes of the game if it means they're then going to go clean their room. So, you might actually get a bit more information about that. If they were to then say, oh, no, look, it's going to be in 3 hours' time, you might go, right, so look, I'd be happy you doing it at any point within the next half hour, but I've got some friends coming over this afternoon, so I want the house to look nice, when we could have friends over. So, again, I think the thing that really picks up, that really, covers the turn toward response is that it's still very curious. Another one could be, oh, what are you doing? Right? A young person might ask you. A turn away might be, oh, it's none of your business. Right? A turn against might be, what am I doing? What are you doing? You still haven't cleaned your room. Right? So there can still be this kind of thing around, you know, these triggers that are sort of sitting underneath that get brought up. And of course, you know, that can sometimes escalate things in a situation where maybe it may have been avoidable. A turn towards, you know, something I really like about this response is that there's a little bit of modeling here. So, you know, you said something like, I'm scrolling through Facebook for a little bit before I get my chores done around the house. So, I mean, there's a couple of things I really love about this response, but I think it shows some really good modeling that you as parents parents or carers will often do a lot of stuff around the house as well. And what that really shows is that, you know, you're balancing your time. And that's often what we'd be expecting of young people, that, you know, if they do get tech time, that they're able to balance that time by also meeting all of their other commitments. Why do you get to play on your phone and I can't play on my phone? You know, the turn towards, you know, my family was rampant on this one. Just cause, right? I don't need to give an example. I don't need to give a response. I don't need to tell you why, just because, right? The turn against might look something like, I cannot believe how disrespectful you are. I never would have spoken back to my parents like that. And we often know that this is something that can come up for a lot of parents too, where they go, oh, I never would have spoken like this, acted like this, reacted like this with my parents, you know, and a lot of shock that can come sometimes from the reactions they get from their children. And again, this is a response that's probably going to lead to disconnection. A turn towards might be, it seems a bit unfair, doesn't it? Right? Now, this is a very interesting one because it doesn't mean that anything's going to be any different, right? You know, mum, dad, carer, whoever it is probably still going to be playing on their phone. But what this turn toward really does is it acknowledges that from the adolescent's point of view, it does seem unfair, you know, that they've got restrictions on them that aren't present for the adults. And so by sort of making a statement like this, you know, it seems a bit unfair, doesn't it? They might go, yeah, it's completely unfair. I don't understand why. You know, you're allowed to go on your phone whenever you want, but I have to get off it. I have to get off technology at 7 p.m. And what this can open up would be a conversation around, right, so, you know, you're not really sure why it is that these rules are in place. Would you like to have a conversation about that? So it then opens an opportunity to go, right, so you're feeling a little bit unsure why these rules are even in place. Should we talk about that? Would you like me to tell you why those rules are in place? Because potentially they don't understand. So there can be some really good conversations that can open up with some of those turn toward responses. So just on that, I don't know if there were any questions on that, but I think I actually will move forward just because, you know, we're going to get to question time shortly anyway. So whatever you've got on your mind, I'm sure, you know, we can hold off until then. Emotion coaching. So this is a particular model of 5 steps that we teach in one of our parenting programs that I'm going to briefly speak on a little bit later. But often what we find happens is, you know, we often talk about an emotion coaching response looks like noticing an emotion, connecting with our young person, listening and validating how they're feeling and what's going on, and then setting limits and problem solving if necessary. And we often see that as a really nice interaction that's really, that's typically really well received by young people as well, that can happen between parents and children. What we often find happens though, is that parents become aware of an emotion or a situation, a problem, and they go, instead of coming down into, aha, and I'm just going to listen to what that's like for them, what's going on for them, how they're feeling, what their perspective on it is, blah, blah, blah. We just go straight to, boom, limits and problem solving. I think one of the key examples of this is often, you know, we hear from a lot of parents, you know, a teen comes through the door really, really angry and says, oh, you know, Mrs. Smith kicked me out of class today. I hate her. She's so mean. She's so rude, you know, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, they're obviously quite angry about that situation. And often the first question that a parent then says is, well, what did you do to Mrs. Smith? Well, she would have had a reason for doing that. So what did you do? So immediately we're sort of jumping to this problem solving. Let's try fix it. Let's try see what the solution is. But of course, what we find is that it really pays off to even just spend 5 to 10 minutes listening to their perspective and going, right, that sounds really tough. That sounds really difficult. That sounds really frustrating that that's what's happened. And then eventually you're going to get down to this limit setting and finding out about what's actually happened in this situation. But taking that little bit of extra time means that you're going to get much less resistance when limits and problem solving come into play. So it's really important in cases like that that we focus on sitting with the emotions and listening, not rushing to problem solving. Often we are really quick to run to problem solving, but a young person will not be able to listen to what we have to tell them until they feel as though we've understood their point of view as the adult. So when we jump to problem solving too quickly, it gives a sense of they just don't get it. And that will often lead to disconnection rather than connection. Okay, so I think this is the last one that I wanted to talk to you about for today, was talking about the talk. And this is really an idea around how is it that we have tough conversations. Now, often, there is not a family I know that has not gone through tough circumstances, let alone what every family is going through in Victoria right now with lockdown. Tough conversations come up in families often, but very infrequently, very rarely do we have any guidance or rules around how it is that we should have these conversations. They sort of just come up, a difficult situation presents itself, and all of a sudden we kind of just find everyone in a conversation about it, or not in a conversation about it because maybe we feel too uncomfortable to have the conversation, and we, often that can be, a cauldron for big emotions, frustration, family conflict, and lots of things to arise. So talking about the talk is really an idea around figuring out how our family and the people in our family should we approach tough conversations when they need to be had. And the idea is that we have a plan of how to do this before the tough conversations rock up. So this is something that could be implemented really, today or tomorrow. It's not about waiting for a big situation to present. In fact, this works better as a preparation strategy. So examples of when, talking about the talk might come in handy would be when we've got some form of bad news to deliver, when a boundary's been breached, or, maybe there's something that our young people won't be allowed to do that they really want to do. So in terms of how we do this, often what we're really looking at is finding a time when things are calm, when things are sort of in a relaxed mood in the family, and approaching a conversation to find out from each of our young people in the home how it is that they would like us to have conversations with them, should there be a big conversation or a tough conversation to have. So, some examples of questions that we might ask would be something like, if I needed to give you information that I didn't think that you'd like, how would be the best way for me to approach that? How would be the best way for me to initiate that conversation with you? Are there times that you'd be more or less open to having these conversations? Yeah, so a lot of young people will say to me often, in terms of when we're trying to explore what's the family conflict going on, they'll go, yeah, but mum came in when I was playing Xbox and wanted to have the conversation then. Now, sometimes that's unavoidable. Sometimes that's just the only time available. But of course, chances are they're going to be much open to having that conversation with you if they're not needing to pause the game. I also remember as a teenager, whenever someone happened to have to pause, I go, pause. Yeah, like it would just make a thing like, let's look, what is it that you want to talk about? Kind of let's get it over and done with type thing. Another question could be, where should we have that conversation? So, my guess would be that most people probably wouldn't want to do it in public in front of everyone in the home. So would it be that, we'd bring up the conversation in, for example, someone's bedroom, or not in the home, on a drive somewhere, maybe where there's privacy, just sort of thinking about, the location in which those conversations take place. The last one here, which I think is really quite good, is, if you become upset or distressed during the conversation, what do you think you might be needing from me? And to be honest, I think one that we hear a lot from young people when they are really distressed or upset about things is that very often they might just want space afterwards. And sometimes as parents and carers, we find that really hard to give them that space. So I think because we go, no, maybe we should talk about it more and whatnot. And so I think this question is really good because this will give an opportunity for them to let us know what it is that they will need from us if a tough conversation does come up. And maybe they might say, oh, look, if I get too frustrated about it, I'll want to stop having the conversation. And you might go, great, so how would you let me know if you needed to stop having the conversation? And they might say something like, oh, well, you'll see me getting angry, you'll see me getting upset, and X, Y, Z. And then you'll go, great. So if I start to see that happening, I'll ask you if you'd like to pick this conversation up tomorrow night when maybe you're feeling a bit calmer, and we'll be able to progress things that way. So this is, I think, a really nice preventative strategy that helps us in terms of moving forward. Just briefly, we do have a Tuning Into Teens program. It does run across 8 2-hour sessions, and at the moment we are running this online. So basically we talk about a lot of the concepts that we have discussed in today's program and a lot more. So the program itself is 16 hours, so you can imagine, compared to this 1 hour tonight, we have a lot of time to cover a lot of stuff. But most importantly, we get a lot of examples from the parents and carers that join. So they'll say, look, this happened in my family this week. What should we do about that? This happened in our family this week. And, we're able to provide some different thoughts that might be useful. We do also have 2 more family information sessions similar to tonight, but on quite different topics to tonight. And these are coming up on the 7th of September and the 21st of September. So both Monday nights from 6:30 to 8:30. And these ones are primarily focused on mental health. So one of them is about responding to mental health problems. So acknowledging that, our mental health can sort of go up and down, from time to time, and how is it that we might, support people and respond to people that are going through mental health problems. And then we have one on responding to mental health crisis. So this is really talking about when people are quite unwell in their mental health and maybe aren't able to keep themselves safe. What are some of the things that we can do to help support them and keep them safe in those situations as well? I'm just looking, and those try booking links are a little bit small, so you might be able to see it there, but otherwise we might see if we can get them, one of the facilitators, maybe to post them in the chat, just in case you'd like to sign up for those ones there. Other than that, I might stop sharing my PowerPoint now, because that is all of our slides. We might just go to questions now to see if there's any that have popped up.
Thanks, Anthony. So I'm just having a look. That was really good. Thank you so much. So we're just having a look at some questions just to see, is there anyone anyone have any questions for Anne? So we can, at this stage, I think all the questions have been answered. Having a quick look again. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask now.
The other thing I'm thinking as well is that even if you have a question that might not be directly related to the content tonight, but you've got it on your mind, we'll obviously prioritize questions related to the content. But if you've got questions that aren't, it sounds like we've got a bit of time to be asking them. So feel free to pop those in as well.
Yeah. The other thing too, as placed in this Q&A section, we do have an email address if you wish to email us at youthcounselling@wyndham.vic.gov.au. Any questions can come to us via that email address.
So I actually just see one. Oh, sorry, Rosie. Sorry, keep going.
No, that's okay. Go for it.
I can just see one question that's just come through. Sort of asking, how do we get conversations flowing again once they have derailed? So there's a couple of things around this. So if we mean derailed in terms of the example that I gave earlier about how, I'll just sort of change topics onto something else. I think that one thing that can be a really good idea is just to call it out and acknowledge it. So to sort of do something like, oh, I'm doing that thing where I've derailed again and I've gone completely off topic. We can get to that in a second, but before we do, can you keep telling me about what it is that you were talking about? I'm not sure, but this question might be about like, how do we also get conversations flowing if maybe relationships have broken down? And if that's the case, I think that it can be really useful. The Gottman Institute, which is sort of like a family and relationships organisation, they have a great Facebook page. And one of the things that they often talk about is that, relationships are like a piggy bank. And, that even though you might not be getting anything back, every time you do have a positive interaction or extend the option for a positive interaction, you're kind of putting little deposits into that little piggy bank. So even if, your teen or your young person is completely shutting you out, completely shutting you off, it might feel like you're getting nowhere. But the message that you're sending them ultimately, just by responding to those bids for connection, by opening up and putting yourself out there to have those positive interactions, just from doing that, you're sending the message that you're able to. And, all of our tuning in facilitators, our tuning into teens facilitators, which is that parenting group I briefly mentioned, can attest to how much great work can happen in relationships when parents do constantly put themselves out there, respond to those bids for connection, try to create those positive moments. We've certainly have parents that have come through our program that we've remained in contact with who have said things to us like, I just kind of kept doing it, kept putting those bids for connection out there, kept trying to show up, kept trying to be, available and whatnot. And eventually after 6 months, they let me in. And so I think our message would be that if it is that communication lines have broken down, that we keep trying and be prepared to that it's a long game, not a short game, and to try and just keep going with keeping those trying to make those connection moments happen. I can see another question here around what do you do if they start slamming doors or throwing things? And there's a particular line that we have in our Tuning Into Teens program, which, time and time again I come back to, and I think it's brilliant, which is that all emotions are okay, but not all behaviors are okay. So it's okay for you to be angry that I've taken the iPad off you, but it's not okay for you to be slamming doors. It's not okay for you to be hitting your parent or carer. It's not okay for you to be doing any of these things. So what we would say would be that so look, in the moment, if somebody is being physical, the first thing that we would always say, regardless of their age, is that you keep yourself out of the way and not in any situation that you feel that you could be harmed in. You know, that would always be our first piece of advice. Once the situation is calmed down, this idea of addressing the behaviour and saying, so, you know, all emotions, it's okay for you to be angry at me, but it's not okay for you to slam the doors. That distinction between the emotion and the behavior is really important, because emotions are normal. It's very normal and expected that we're going to feel things like anger, frustration, you know, worry, fear. All of these emotions are very normal and come up for us. But aggression and rage, which are when the behavior is acted out in an aggressive way, is not okay. So, you know, that's something that's a line that we often use that really helps young people to understand that line between how they're feeling, which is completely fine, and the behavior, which is actually not okay. How do you make a teen talk? You know, especially if they might be quiet and not wanting to communicate. So I guess, you know, there's a couple of things that I often think about here. So I think it's important to know that, you know, all of us in this world, we are all very different. And, you know, there are some of us who are quieter, and then there are other people who are absolute chatterboxes like me. And so what can often be really good is, you know, there's this particular training I've done, which is called no bullshit therapy. And, you know, it's very, very well named because it's really about just cutting to the chase and being direct. You know, so something that they might recommend in cases where a teen might be quite, you know, might be very quiet and not wanting to communicate, might be something like asking a question around, hey, so, you know, I've noticed that you're being a bit quiet, and I was just wondering, is that just because, you know, you sometimes tend to be a bit more of a quieter person, or might it be because there could be something wrong? So, you know, rather than us just like kind of sitting there, you know, like thinking, like going through every doomsday scenario in our mind, sometimes it can be really useful just to ask some of those questions. Or maybe when you're driving in a car, you know, side by side, that can be often, you know, parents and carers tell us that's a really good opportunity to talk to young people. It can be really good to pick up on something like, hey, you know, I've just got a bit of a question. Sometimes you know, you seem to be very quiet, and a question pops into my head around, I wonder if something's wrong, or I wonder if they're, you know, feeling, or I wonder if they're just, you know, a quieter person, you know. So you can also just ask that question, and if they give you that feedback and then go, no, you know, like I think I'm just a bit quieter, you know, that sort of thing. A really nice follow-up would be something like, okay, right, if there was something wrong, you know, how is it, do you think that you would bring it up with me, or what would be a way, you know, given that you do tend to be a little bit quieter, what would be a way that you might bring it up with me? You know, and I kind of think a lot about me being the loudest person in the room constantly, and my brother, who is, you know, was and still is typically just a much quieter, laid back, you know, chilled out sort of person. And I think that if he was to express something was wrong, he would do it in a very different way than I would. So I'd also want to get a bit curious around, you know, how is it that they would feel comfortable communicating to me if something was wrong, and what might be some of those things that I need to keep an eye out for. Can you give a magic word to start talking about the talk? So I'm trying to think about, I'm trying to think, okay, I think maybe that might mean, you know, could it be that if there's a conversation to be had, you might say to them, you know, you might have a particular, you know, keyword or something that you might say to them so that they know that you need to talk to them, and you can go have that conversation without perhaps letting the whole family know. That's how I've sort of interpreted that question. If I've got that right, you know, I think that's a great idea. You know, it's really, I think, about finding out what's going to work best for different people in the family. And of course, if you know for one of your teens, so I think especially if you've got more than one child in the house, if you need to have a conversation with one child, and you sort of say, hey, can I talk to you? Is it going to be then that everyone else goes, oh, well, what do you have to talk about? Is John in trouble? That was me. That was me constantly. My mum would be like, oh, John, I need to talk to him. Oh, is John in trouble? What did John do? Did John get in trouble? Is he naughty? Yeah, I would always be that one. So, I think especially if you've got a dynamic like that going on, it can be, a really good idea maybe to have like a certain way of bringing that up that might not alert everybody. I hope I've got that right. Beautiful. I think that might be most of the questions. Hopefully I've answered all of those properly, but I mean, if not, feel free to pop that in. We can always hang around for another 5 minutes or so. Is there anything else, guys, that you think that I've missed in terms of questions or anything like that?
No, I think you've mentioned everything, Ant. I think there aren't any more questions, so that's great. And we've received quite a bit of feedback from participants who have really got a lot out of tonight, which is great to see. And that's what we like to hear. But we'd also like to make sure that that we get more feedback from everybody. So you look out for an email survey that will come through by email. So we would really appreciate any feedback you have, positive or negative, so that we can always look to improve. Or, if there's anything that we could add, please give us those, that feedback. Also, just would like to acknowledge that we are in challenging times at the moment. So just wanting to make sure that people are aware, and I'll just put myself on screen now so people can see me. Hang on. Let me just see if I can manage this one.
You got this, right?
I don't know if I do. Hang on, here we go. Hang on, I think it's still ants. No, yes, it is. Anyway, it won't allow me to put my face on, but that's okay. So I just wanted to say that it is really challenging times at the moment with the whole COVID situation. So we just want to make sure that the message is loud and clear that please reach out for support. We are here and there are services after hours, but, as we've mentioned earlier, that's Lifeline and Kids Helpline and Beyond Blue. But please, if you're needing any further support, we are providing not only youth counselling and family counselling, but also community counselling. So that's for members of the community who need support for like a single session, up to 2 sessions actually, just to support anyone who's having a tough time. So please head over to the website. There's a link in the Q&A, you'll see that, or go to the Wyndham Together website and you'll find it there. Type in counselling in the search and it'll come through. Just also let your friends know, let people know that this is available because it is really challenging times and we want to acknowledge that and just let people know that we are available and the help is out there. Also, just thanks very much everybody for attending. Great to have you all. Was there anything else that you wanted to say, Anne, before we finish up?
So you know what my memory is like, Rosie, so we might have already mentioned this, but just to let everybody know that this is being recorded and will be uploaded. Yes. So you'd be very welcome to go back and take a look at it. That might have been mentioned somewhere else, but I thought I'll just remind everyone that. And if you know anyone else that you think might be interested, you'd certainly be able to link them to the video as well to share.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks. I just forgot that. So awesome. Thanks for that. I think that's